So no more cuss words.
Damn it.
Check, check, 1, 2.
I'm checking. Yeah, they can't hear us. Yeah, they can hear us. I see them in chat. It's about 10 seconds delayed. Meh.
Yeah, I've changed my mind about the whole thing, frankly.
Hi, everybody, but like for real. Oh God, I'm monitoring myself and it's terrible. Okay, great. Now I fixed it. Hopefully the echo is gone. Are we still echoing? That's an important question.
We're gonna have to wait 10 seconds to find out.
I know, that's the worst part. And is
I
it
think
just
the echo
me?
is gone. I keep playing it and it's good.
Perfect.
I keep unmuting it for myself.
Wonderful. Well, as you can tell, we're just setting this up. We're getting started, a little warmed up, but we're happy that you all came to join us and hang out with us while we do this fun stuff for Invictus. So this is our Invictus staff chats. Alex, why don't you tell everybody where you're coming from on this?
Well, I'm Alex. You've probably seen me around as various characters at Invictus. I'm not quite sure what else you'd like me to say.
So Alex and I are doing this because both of us have some streaming experience, although it would be maybe surprise you from what I've done so far, but that's fine. So Alex, like, where can people see your other stuff?
I'm sorry?
Where can they see your other stuff that
What
you
do you mean?
Like your stream.
Oh,
Point people at your stream.
Plugs.
Plug yourself real quick.
Sorry, I didn't realize that's where we were here. So I have been doing a Twitch stream for a few months now. I run a Twitch stream that is both partially gaming, partially some sewing, along with some LARP chat at Zella929.
Awesome.
And now I'm here with you, helping you guys with this Twitch stream where we're talking about the LARP that we run.
Yes. So if you don't know me, I'm also at Invictus stuff. You've undoubtedly seen me being probably bad. Probably a mean person. So I do a podcast. Sometimes we do some Twitch stuff. It's called Adventure Incorporated. We play games. And so Alex and I are teaming up for the next couple of weeks, months, to talk to the various members of this staff so that you can sort of get an insight into the people behind the game, especially maybe people you don't always necessarily get to interact with in certain ways. And maybe you'll find something that you're interested in game you didn't know you were going to be interested in. So we're starting that discussion off with a very special person for us. This is Nathaniel. Nathaniel, tell us a little bit about you.
So my name's Nathaniel Moore. I'm an Aries. I don't have any kind of podcast or stream, so you can't follow me. I suppose if you find me on Facebook, we can think about being friends. But yeah, other than that, I don't really do any kind of online stuff. I've been in gaming like through tabletop since at least like 6th grade or something, and been in Accelerant Gaming for 7 or 8 years now. prior to that, some like parlor LARP stuff.
Cool. So Nathaniel is the special one for us to start with because Nathaniel, you will not have seen around at any of the Invictus events. He is on the other side of the world. And by world, I mean country. But he has been instrumental in a lot of what makes Invictus Invictus. And so we wanted to have an opportunity to come and speak with him a little bit about his experience with Invictus and the stuff that he's done so far. So thank you for joining us for this.
Yeah, no problem. Excited to be here.
So we are
excited
going
to talk to people in the future.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that's right. You are several hours ahead of you. So we have some questions for Nathaniel, and we would like to open it up to those of you in the audience who have questions for Nathaniel as well. So just go ahead and throw as they come to you, throw them into the chat, and we'll make sure that we get them out to Nathaniel. So
I will keep an eye on the chat for questions.
Perfect. Nathaniel, tell us a little bit about how you got started LARPing.
So how I got started LARPing. So like I said, it was about 7 or 8 years ago for like weekend-long buffer LARPs. And that was actually the first event I went to was the one-day introduction of Invictus 1. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not. That I went to without knowing anyone else who was PCing the game. I think I knew one staff member, and that was it. So I was very unhappy when, like, after about 9 months, Invictus 1 did not continue, and went off and found a different Accelerant game that's actually still running and that I still play, although obviously I don't make it to every event since I live in California. Yeah. Prior to that, I did a lot of like Mind's Eye Theater and Pro LARP stuff going back all the way to like college. So depending on your sort of level of LARP snobbery, you can decide where I actually started LARPing. Since there's a lot less fighting is, picking up a stick and hitting someone, and a lot more like, involved in that. But I did that for several years, like vampire, werewolf, all that kind of stuff.
Do you feel like a lot of the experience that you had with that parlor LARP style translates to what you've done in Accelerant? Did you carry a lot of that with you, or are they just so vastly different for you?
So I think it definitely informs the kind of plot that I write. Anyone who's been involved in the Darkling plot can probably see a vampire connection there in terms of like becoming a monstrous creature and sort of the tragedy mixed with personal horror aspect of it. Certainly, weekend buffer LARPing involves a lot more physicality, and you have to make obstacles that we can then actually implement and make people do, right? Like in Mind's Eye Theater kind of stuff, you can do a lot of just and there's a giant gate that you got to get through, and like it's more descriptive in a sort of tabletop way. Whereas with Accelerant stuff, you've got to actually be willing to go out and build a giant gate for people to see if you want that to be there. Which I've only seen done once. Yeah. So I think it informed a lot of the sort of story choices I make. But writing for this is sort of a whole different beast in a lot of ways.
Excellent. So you started as a player of Invictus, and then the first Invictus stopped running. How did you come to join the staff side of things?
So I think I just emailed Mickey out of the blue after like a LARP cast being like, hey, you're doing this again? I want in. And he knew who I was at that point. So it wasn't like a complete, just like, who the hell is this guy? And I think probably the only reason he said yes was I was on his team in Fifth Gate, and I was their treasurer. And I had this ridiculous spreadsheet that after every event, like the Sunday, I would go home and I would update it, and it would have every single magical item that we had, all of the specifications of what it did, how much it would cost to sort of reinitialize it for the next event, and how much we would get if we sold it. Plus all of our cash, which, because I am who I am, like it was trended, like we knew how much cash we had after every event, so we could like have a little line graph. And anyone who knows Mickey knows that like organization is sort of a weird fetish for him.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm seeing that he is saying that it was an absolutely beautiful spreadsheet.
So I think he probably reflected on that and was like, yeah, all right, he's in. Like, if nothing else, I can stare at some spreadsheets that'll make, which is great because I haven't really made any spreadsheets for Invictus.
Perfect.
Oh God. Sorry. The chat is very intriguing.
It's yeah, they're really they're on board for you, Nathaniel. Don't worry about it.
We might need to ask you a question about tentacles. I don't know.
So Mickey's on chat.
Yeah, of course. So what is it about LARPing that keeps you invested in it as a hobby?
So for me, it's a lot of the player-to-player stuff. I love, as a player, I love just hanging around when there's a little bit of downtime. Like when you've just done 3 mods in a row and you need to like take a break off your feet for a little while. Just sort of hanging on the back porch with folks and just shooting the breeze without much to do and sort of discussing everything that we figured out and the theory crafting, which is the very nice term that LARPers use for like bullshit conspiracy theory generation. I also honestly just love like that it gives me a chance to unplug and that like there's an expectation that you're not going to be able to answer your phone and that you're not going to look at your phone, and just gives you a chance to really like disconnect from the outside world for a little bit.
So obviously your experience with Invictus has been a little bit different. You've done a lot of the legwork for the game and you've put a lot of things into motion, but you haven't exactly been able to execute them. And those elements, especially that you've mentioned about sort of what keeps you connected to LARP, those haven't been things that you've been able to pull through on either. So how has your experience with Invictus specifically been different from that, and how have you found ways to stay connected in that way?
Yeah, I mean it's weird because I moved out to California after I was staff, but before event 1. So I was physically there for the like the 1-day play tests that we had. But then yeah, so I've done a lot of writing, but obviously I can't implement it. Though I think like for like the player-to-player stuff and just sort of sitting around and not doing a whole lot, obviously that was never going to translate as being part of staff, no matter what. You know, I think in terms of not being able to implement, it's fortunate in that I feel like there's a lot of people on staff for Invictus who are very good at implementation. So it's never a concern for me that like what I write isn't going to be able to be done. I think we got folks who really nail that. And the trick is always just then getting the feedback and getting the right information so that I can integrate what players have done into how the plot progresses. And I think we've been pretty good at that too. Where it gets a little fuzzy for me is like, I can see like, okay, this is the backstory for Ramses and these are the choices this player made. And this is everything that they've done. But if you've never actually spoken with that person, like there's an aspect to their character that you never really get to know. Mm-hmm. Like if someone were to ask me like, oh, this new NPC, would they get along with Ramses? I have no idea because nowhere is it written like how outgoing they are and how likely they are to call someone on their BS. Like personality doesn't necessarily translate in terms of just through character history and just through sort of the feedback I get on mod stuff.
I think that's really interesting because especially since a lot of people who write their character histories have an intention with a character, right? And sometimes that intention pans out and sometimes that intention changes as you actually get an opportunity to play the character. And so it's interesting because you don't necessarily have a lot of that information about how these characters have shifted, and so you're kind of viewing it from a skewed lens a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. And I try to write in a way that is personally directed stuff aside, is not aimed at any individual, so it doesn't necessarily matter. And if I am going to be targeting a specific character, I'll do my best to talk to one of their staff members who's maybe interacted with them a little more. If it is someone from the Caled Circle, talking to Jake, or whoever the appropriate staff person is, or even long-term NPC who's sort of been implementing some of the plots. That way, I'm not just taking a shot in the dark.
Well, and I will say, I think you've done a tremendous job at finding the story and finding the elements that resonate with players, even through this gap. I think you do a really good job at generating really amazing modules and contents for that.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the elements that you do work on that are things that have been, specific to you. So you've done a lot of writing for the Hegemony, for the Caled Circle, for the Scald of Heaven, and you've done a lot of writing for rituals in general in the game. Is that pretty accurate? And then, of course, there's been a lot of other things that have come through that have your touch on them as well.
Some we can talk about.
That's one of the difficulties with this game, right? Is that we have a game that has many, many, many layers to it. And many of them are, we're on a 5-year or so game. There's a lot of secrets still to find. And so we'll do our best to talk about a lot of these things. But some of them might be a little broad. So let's talk a little bit about the Hegemony. What were your inspirations for the story that you want to tell with the Hegemony, and what are the themes you're trying to approach with them?
So the Hegemony kind of came from an early discussion when we were making Invictus 2 about how the nations should be different. And so the Hegemony came out of the idea of having a more corporate-esque ownership. And in terms of inspiration for it, a lot of obviously Shadowrun and Altered Carbon and all these things were it's sort of a corporate thing that were fed into the inspiration, but there were two sort of glaring issues there. One being those are all sci-fi, generally speaking, and we really wanted to reinforce the fantasy setting of the game, not the sci-fi sort of feel of those settings. And two, they all tend to be pretty grimdark. Everything's always going to suck, and I didn't necessarily want the Hegemony to just be the crap nation that everyone comes from and is all dressed in black leather and upset with everyone else for every little thing. A lot of more Mind's Eye Theater stuff. The sort of three corporations that balance out and sort of each hold power within it kind of came from that, so that you could have this sliding scale of prosperity, and sort of crossed with that is a sliding scale of individual freedom. So you could, if you wanted to be from the super controlling top down but prosperous place, you could, and if you wanted to be from the we've got freedom but life's harder, you could do that, and anywhere in between. Particularly where I think one of the advantages of the Invictus setting with the many worlds connected by portals is that you can kind of allow for whatever individual sort of mark that a player wants to hit for their homeworld, because you can just say, this world is a part of X company and it's a little better off than the other ones for whatever reason, because that's that was required for their backstory. Mm-hmm. In terms of their themes and what I'm thinking of with a lot of their plots, we haven't delved too much into it yet because we don't really have, or haven't had historically, a lot of Tindarians or Hegemony players. But the plots that do exist that will probably start to become a little more prominent going forward revolve a lot around like who you consider your people to be, where the hegemony is it's a nation and then it's split into these three different corporations. You know, where does your loyalty lie? The corporation or the hegemony as a whole? And then the sort of core species of the hegemony are these Tindarians, who are then sort of further split into low-bound versus high-bound, based off of more or less nothing. Like it's a capricious blood thing, but influenced by who your parents are. So it's sort of a further split of, okay, so I'm low-bound and this other guy is low-bound, but we work for different companies. Am I more tied to him because he's more like me? Am I more tied to this executive high-bound who sort of shares the same corporation as me? And I think a lot of that, that's sort of a lot of what I wanted to explore with it. Mm-hmm. And I think, for instance, a lot of how the hegemony is held together over the years is the fact that there are these other nations and these other species, because it creates all these other people for them to sort of be create solidarity among the Tindarians, I guess, in terms of, okay, well, they're still at least like me, as opposed to like these Zavarians who have horns and just sort of give everything away for free, which is crazy to the hegemony. Yeah, I've rambled for a little while there.
That's okay. I think that
rambling is great.
Yeah, I think that these are meaty topics, and so that's going to happen from time to time, regardless. But how about the Kaled Circle? One of you did a lot of the. If I remember correctly, the Kaled Circle existed before you, but you picked up a lot of what like it was, right?
Yeah. So big props. Big props there for Jake Gardner, because he's the one who actually wrote the original Kaled Circle write-up and the original Scald of Heaven write-up. So I haven't written like in-game general summaries and descriptions like that. Like I did not create the Kaled Circle in any way. Just partway through year one, just in terms of, balancing everything in his life, Jake needed to step away a little bit from some of the between games workload and responsibilities, and that ended up getting put off on me. Mm-hmm. So I became involved in helping architect the plot for that stuff. But Jake obviously remains involved. He implements a lot of it. And he's a fantastic member of staff. I'm most respectful of what the guy does. So in terms of sort of themes there, a lot of the Kaled themes are around sort of how do you remain true to your roots in a changing world, I guess. A lot of the current sort of political events going on there have to do with this sort of, I would call them like an Orthodox group, I guess, who want to go back to like the good old days of how they used to perform their raids, versus the sort of current leadership, which is more entrenched in an understanding of trying to make themselves a part of the many worlds and not just the Kaled worlds. And obviously that doesn't always work so well if you're just kicking in your neighbor's door and stealing all their stuff.
What?
Hey,
right?
There are strict laws about how we kick in our neighbors' doors.
Especially right now. Yeah. I mean, you've got to be at least 6 feet away from them when you do it.
No, but they haven't figured out. Just they still do it.
Cool. So in Scald of Heaven, what do those? I know that the religions are a little bit different than the nations in terms of their breadth, but talk a little bit about the Scald of Heaven and what you enjoy exploring in that.
Yeah. So the Scald of Heaven was originally written as we coined it as I think like our minor religion, because it didn't really extend beyond the borders of a single one of the nations. All of the others, they might be more common in one place or another, but there's nothing odd necessarily about a Riavan follower of Dakos or an Alaran worshiper of the children of the dragons. But the Skald of Heaven was originally written as just like, okay, this is like the Kaled believe this. It's not even necessarily a religion. It's like this mythic figure from their past. It's sort of like a, this ancient figure who supposedly did a whole lot of things, but worship was kind of a strong word. And then I think we saw enough players really gravitate towards that we're like, okay, well, we should expand this out. So yeah, I think about a month ago released a much more expanded write-up for the Skald of Heaven, which is something that I put together with discussions with Jake, and obviously Mickey's eternal oversight over all things. I'm kidding, he's not.
No, that's fine. We can portray that.
Is he still watching this?
Yeah.
So we wanted to keep the element of it being more of this mythic person from their past, while still giving people sort of something to do within the religion, really. And if I'm being perfectly honest, a lot of my inspiration for how to handle it came from the Klingons from Star Trek, because particularly in DS9, you get a lot of like talk of who Kahless was and all the things he did. And like the thing that kept running through my head when I was writing this was there's some scene where Worf basically, like he's being questioned about whether they ever had gods, and he says something like, "Oh yeah, we killed them."
I just got to that episode in a rewatch of DS9, so I'm so happy right now. Sorry.
So the write-up is sort of designed to be this way of like still allowing for stories to be very different from person to person, right? Like there's no true doctrine of the Skald of Heaven, but we wanted to give players achievements, basically, right? Like something that they could strive to complete and maybe earn a cool title, garner some respect from other followers of Danara, who is the Skald of Heaven for people who have not read that particular write-up. So there is these sort of 5 triumphs of Danara, and sort of doing something that is seen to match any one of them is considered sort of a great honorable spiritual thing to have done, and you gain a very specific title for each one, as a way to basically just allow players, if they wish, to pursue the idea of becoming an inspiration to other followers of Danara. And there's also a priest class called Skald, which in keeping with the sort of Zavarian and Kaled mentality is extremely loose. I think the rules as written are just you go to the circle of skalds and you prove to them that you're a skald. And if someone says, well, what does that mean? It's like, are you a skald?
When something is a saying in
Properly proven.
Right.
Cool. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about having set this up and put this thing into motion, where we always are curious how players, how the staff would like to sort of see their zone as a way for players to interact with, right? So you're writing Hegemony, you're writing Kaled Circle, you're writing Skald of Heaven. What sorts of players, maybe that don't even realize they'd be interested in those sorts of things, should maybe be focusing on some of that stuff they may have passed up before because they were like, oh, I'm not from the Hegemony, I don't even know what's going on over there?
What kind of players would be interested in Hegemony versus Kaled? Is that the question?
Or just in like what kind of elements of players do you think would be drawn toward the things that you have written, that maybe not even realize that they would be excited about your stuff?
Sure. So for the Hegemony, I think it's written in a way that if you like to deal with backstabbing, that's probably the place that you want to go. If you want to choose a side and go in, find some other people and like in a subtle way kick in their teeth, that's the place for you. And the Kaled is the exact opposite of that. If you want a culture where your disagreements with someone is to walk up to them and kick in their teeth, Literally, that's probably the culture. But it's also like I would say like Kayla does like the bonfires and telling obviously exaggerated stories and like that kind of aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of my other plots are probably a little more. If you want to make tough decisions, if you want to decide which best of the bad routes you want to take, that's often where a lot of my plots wind up going.
God, I'm pretty sure that's the name of this game. But that's just because you, me, Mickey, Jake, like that's how all of our plots run.
I'm really interested in how the people have reacted to the Darklings, and in particular the Gilead, because the feedback I've heard is that some people are like, "Oh yeah, no, those people were great. It's horrible that they're gone," and other people are like, "Oh my God, those people were terrible."
So let's talk about Darklings a little bit. Oh, go ahead, Alex.
Oh, I was just going to say there is a question in chat. There's a few questions, but I'm going to start with the first one for Nathaniel. William Winterblade says, I have heard through the grapevine you had a hand in affecting the various scrolls of magic. The name is escaping him. Do you draw the spells from personal experience, pure imagination? Where do you get those ideas?
Yeah, so those were all taught to me by the third circle. No. So there's where's the inspiration for each individual scroll? So I try to make the ritual scrolls that I've written vastly different from individual skills already in the rulebook. I feel like rituals, where they are for the most part, like pop it once a weekend at most. It should be something kind of unique and unusual that you get to be able to do. Because especially, they're relatively expensive. It's not an always useful kind of thing. So I tried to balance things like giving you something unique and interesting, obviously in flavor for the school of magic that it's pursuing, and then sort of Mickey in a lot of ways is my I don't know what to call it, auditor of does this need to be more or less powerful than you've already made it? Does this fly in the face of some of the mythos of the setting that we've created? That sort of thing. So it, for like numerology, for instance, obviously it's all supposed to be sort of numbers and place magic, as opposed to say necromancy. Gonna be playing with bones, and that's all there is to it.
I'm gonna blow up Nathaniel's spot here a little bit, because he is underselling some of the work he has put into these rituals. Nathaniel has worked, and also he is underselling his use of spreadsheets, because I've seen the spreadsheets.
Yeah, I forgot about that one actually.
So one of the things that you have done is you have developed almost a language to rituals that allows for an understanding of magic in our world in a way that maybe could be missed if you don't have a wide breadth of knowledge about magic. And I know that some of this it comes and goes, and it depends on the spell, and it depends on the school and all of that thing. But where did your idea for this come from, and how did you bring this idea together?
So the answer to that is I had a conversation with Mickey about how rituals should be created, and part of it was he emphasized that we should have some consistency in the content of rituals. So yeah, there are the actions that take place in rituals contain some level of consistency in terms of what they mean, and that is absolutely something that, if you learn enough about rituals, you can perhaps start to understand what it is specifically that you're doing in cast ritual. I'm like trying to thread a needle here.
No. You're doing great. You're doing great, and you don't have to say anything more than that. I just wanted to call out your deft skill with this. So you're doing great. Alex, you said there were a few others?
Yes, so there was a question about advice for new Tindarian or Hegemony PCs, but honestly, I think that I would love it if all staff members throughout these chats that we're having on Tuesdays would answer just what's your advice for a new PC in this game?
Just in general, any new PC?
Yeah. I mean, if you'd like to answer the question, which was specifically Hegemony, but in general, I think it would be interesting to hear from each of us as to what our various advice is to new players.
So in general, my advice to new players, sort of regardless of game, but in particular Invictus, because I know the staff will be nice about it, is talk to everyone else at game and sort of get to know what they're already doing. And B, when you see something that you think is interesting, just run it down and ask 1,000 questions of the NPCs. They should all be carrying notebooks, so even if they can't answer then and there, they'll get back to you. And that's part of how we'll know, what you're interested in, and we'll make sure that we have content related to that, so that when you come back next time, there'll be more of what you're looking for. In terms of a new to the hegemony, I would suggest having a decent understanding of the 3 corporations and think about how your character really views people who are not in your own corporation. Are you someone who's sort of a company loyalist who, if they're not on your side, they're a son of a bitch? Are you someone who, you've picked your sports team, and it's not really a whole lot more than that? Because of the nature of the hegemony, every NPC you interact with, that's going to color how you interact with them, because they're from somewhere. And I think that that's sort of the piece that will really help drive how you end up fitting into the plot and the decisions that are going to end up being asked of players to make.
Yeah, it seems like with the hegemony especially, there is the politics involved. To be involved in that as a PC, you're going to get the maximum amount of enjoyment out of what's happening in the hegemony. You can certainly be part of the hegemony and not really get involved with that stuff, but you're not going to get the same level of value out of it as you might out of like the Kaled Circle if you're not as yeah.
And I mean, there's absolutely like the neutral organization in the hegemony, the Guild of Contractual Obligations, the lawyers. So there's unbiased people that you'll meet, but even how your character views the Guild of Contractual Obligations, and whether you see that as a hindrance to your corporation or not, is really core to a lot of what will end up happening with the hegemony and the decisions that will be put to the players.
Perfect. So what experiences have you had at other LARPs that inform the kinds of things you're trying to create for Invictus?
So I think one of the big LARPs that I played for a while had a whole plot around how much do you trust structures of power around you. And I say that, and even as the sentence comes out of my mouth, every LARP I've ever played has included an element of how much do you trust the structures of power around you. I don't remember the question.
So when you've taken those elements that these elements you've taken from other games and applied toward your writing in Invictus, what are the elements that you've really grabbed onto and that have sort of become part of your fabric?
Sure. So the things that I love about settings are fullness of knowing that there's X religion, and that's my cat. I don't know if you can hear that. there's ex-religion, and there's these rituals and these beliefs about it, and then there's this church, and there's all of this going on, and that there's sort of more there for you to dig into and understand, and perhaps manipulate. And those are sort of the things that I really enjoy about LARPs. And the more people play Invictus, I think the more they'll find that there's just more and more layers that they can uncover and manipulate and make decisions about. And we definitely are open to that being a part of the game, and are really actively looking.
Cool. Let's see here. So you have obviously some of the plot lines that you've been running. I think it's time to talk about Darklings a little bit. We've mentioned them, we've danced around it, but I think I want to talk to you about Darklings a little bit. So obviously we don't want to talk about anything that is beyond the scope of what is known about the plot line. But what have you really enjoyed about how this story has unfolded, and where it's at now, even from the way you've interacted with it?
Yeah, so I have really enjoyed the extent to which. Can you hear my cat?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to see this cat, but we can do that later.
She does not take to being picked up well. She's coming over right now.
I love the slow bent over. Oh my god, that looks like a cat. It's just cat-like.
I give her 5 more seconds, she'll scream again.
So, what parts of this plotline have you enjoyed, and how it's unfolded, and especially from your vantage point?
So one of the things I've enjoyed is that in all the follow up to an event calls and meetings that we've had, I've gotten feedback from the staff about the conjecture that players have had about what's going on with them, and that's been amazing to listen to, particularly when someone nailed it. I think the event before we revealed a lot of the details about who the Darklings are and used to be, and sort of what caused them to come about. So really, I sort of more that theory crafting, conspiracy theory BS stuff. I love the extent to which Darklings give people the ability, a topic about which they can do that, and that there is a consistency in sort of an archetypal story in a lot of ways, and works obviously with the mythos that we've created. So there's a sort of a predictability to it if you understand how things work in Invictus. And so seeing people sort of figure out what's going on based off of what we've already fed them, and then sort of letting them get that affirmation quickly thereafter that, yes, you are in fact correct. This is exactly what they are, and this is why they came to be. And it's also given me a chance to drop through text props, some stuff that just makes no sense by what players currently understand, because it happened long enough ago that different things were known then, perhaps, that aren't known now, or they believed some lie that's since been proven to be a lie. So it's let me just drop some names that don't make any sense to people, or
nice seeds for the future.
Yeah.
Fun. So obviously the Darklings stuff has been very important to some people, some players who have been say more or less drawn into the Darkling stuff. That mechanic that they have, was that something that you sort of intended to be a binding element to bring people into this plot, or was it just born out of some other part of the story?
No, yeah, it was 100% born out of what Darklings were and what they could become. And I think it's fine to talk about this because it's already known. Darklings used to be a species of the many worlds, and something bad happened to them, and they became these Darklings. And so now, if they catch you when you're down, they'll actually inflict you, and they will steal your name. And should they collect enough names, they become something else. I'll go up to that line. The players have found out more than that, but I'll let the people who know about it know about that.
Yeah, great line. Game. I liked it. It's a beautiful line.
Yeah, it's a great line. So
sorry, I'm watching the chat, and it's hilarious because they're discussing things about the conspiracy theory board, and then of course we also have a message that says, "Tread carefully, the iron fist of tyranny is watching but can't really do anything about it." But I bring up the chat because I really want to get more questions from chat. So earlier on in this stream, we mentioned all the different things that Nathaniel is a part of, plot-wise, and all the things he knows about this game, and that he is actively doing things for in this game. And I'd like you to remind everybody what those things are, in case there have been people who jumped into the stream later and don't know what you listed, so that they can ask questions about it.
Sure. So I wrote the original write-ups for the hegemony, the TriStar hegemony, and the Zendarians. I did not do the original write-up for the Kaled Circle or the Scald of Heaven, but I've taken over those
yes,
plots.
And I thank you for that, because I was the one who started writing it, and then I handed it over to you. So thank you so much for that.
Ritual. I've done a lot of writing for the rituals. And then there's plot elements that are not sort of PC metric based, right? Like it's not an aspect of a player character, such as the Darklings, right? It's a plot element that I'm writing that's involved in the game, but it's not. You don't go on that because you're from a particular nation or a particular religion or something.
Right.
And then a whole lot of like layer 3 and below.
Yeah. Well, we don't talk about layer 3.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I had a follow-up that I wanted to ask you about. Oh boy. Whenever Mickey's messaging, it's a bad sign. Okay, great. So see, I gotta be careful because now I've already set the line somewhere, and
right.
This may be the only one of these I'm hosting. Is what I'm trying to say. You talked a little bit about these elements that you've been a part of, and you came into the staff relatively early, right? I think that you were.
I mean, we were still talking about running Invictus too.
Okay, great. From your perspective, this game has come in a lot of different directions over the time frame that we've been writing it, which has been years and years and years. What are you most excited to see in broad terms played out over the next few years to see come to life within this game that you can talk about?
I know, right? There's like 2 or 3 truths that will be discovered along the way, almost certainly, that I'm really excited to see how players react to them and what they decide to do. Some of them concern the very nature of magic. Some of them concern the nature of gods and what they mean to people. And so as those get more real, and as there's sort of more lead into those truths being discovered, I'm really excited to see what that means to people who are invested in those things. Like what that means to a hardcore practitioner of magic when they find out detail about what specifically it is that they've been doing and why it works, and how that actually influences the world, and sort of the same set of statements for some of the religions.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about this game that's going to be a lot of fun for us to explore as things go on. So you wrote the Tindarians. Did you write the makeup for the Tindarians? This is a side question. I mean, it's a question, but...
Oh, like from the chat?
No, it's from me. I've been wanting to ask this for a while, and I always forget.
Were you not at that meeting?
No, I don't recall. Well, I probably was, but that was undoubtedly a long time ago.
Yeah, no, so all of the makeup, I think, for every species was a group effort to some extent of staff piled into some I think it was like a movie theater-esque room at a place where Jake McCarthy used to live.
Oh, I might not have been there then, because I'm very bad at attending in-person meetings.
Well, you would have been on the phone.
Right. Up here in the Great Frozen North.
But it was something that we did communally, specifically because we wanted to avoid any chance of confusion about what someone was playing.
I just always want you to know that I think the Tindarians are the coolest looking species in the game. I think they have the coolest makeup. I didn't write them. They're not my species. I play one, but I like them. They're my favorite.
I mean, I'm sure I had input on, but yeah, everyone was involved because we didn't want 5 people to be like, and they have elf ears. Be like, so yeah, so that's why I think like some of the makeup, it's some of them have horns, but I think only one species has horns. Only one species has elf ears. Tindarians, I know. I think my input was sort of in the So aside from the base makeup involved in the lipstick,
that's the thing. Like, I asked you this question. You've probably never seen anyone wearing these makeup for any of these species.
Well, have we had a player? Like, it would have been NPCs anyway.
Mostly, yeah. No, entirely, yes.
So we have a question in chat. It's just as the person in chat puts it, it's a simple question. Why an entire pomegranate? I have seen too many times our healers running around asking if someone has a whole pomegranate for the curse of sacrifice. I admit it's funny, but what a requirement. And I just really want to see Nathaniel answer this.
If it fundamentally breaks the rules of telling secrets, you don't have to answer that.
Absolutely. That's
So I have 2 answers. Yeah, there's a reason, and you should ask that question in game and find it out. And because you can just buy pomegranates at Stop and Shop and bring them to game. Like, you don't have to get a pomegranate from staff. Just bring a pomegranate.
You probably won't get a pomegranate from staff. I don't. The likelihood we get a pomegranate kicking around pretty low.
So you think, like, since that is an established ritual, we should probably have at least one pomegranate in case, like,
you can bring it. You can bring it the next time
break
you're
out
around.
That ritual at some point.
Yeah. You can bring it the next time you're in.
I'll FedEx it to you.
We just get an old pomegranate from 3 years ago.
So let's as we start to close out here a little bit, let's look a little bit in what ways you can to the future. What teases do you have for players who might be excited to return to the game in the fall?
What teases do I have?
This was great because I didn't give you any of these questions.
I think that he's trying to trap you.
Whatsoever. Thank you.
I think he's trying to trap you into giving too much information.
This is my constant battle with Mickey. This is my new avenue for making all of the secrets of Invictus come out faster. Is doing them in these staff chats where Mickey can't stop me.
He's admitted that he has no power. We own this right now.
So I will say for because I know we have one person signed up, for new players who are from the hegemony, there's going to be more coming from them in the future. Sort of in some ways because there's been no one around to handle their shit. Their shit's going to become everyone else's problem to some extent. How it goes. So I think folks will actually have a chance to interact with that nation in a way that I think probably hasn't been as available up until this point, because there haven't been PCs to target for that particular plot. I think folks are going to find that now that they understand more about what Darklings are and where they come from, that there's a difficult choice now about what to do about that. Certainly, someone seems to be asking a lot of questions about rituals, and I won't spoil anything, but they should keep doing that. Yeah.
Perfect. So Nathaniel, if people want to reach out to you, if they have questions or they want to talk to you about Invictus, is there a place that you would like people to do that?
Sure. So the Facebook group is always good if it's a public-facing question. If it's a private question, so there's an Invictus staff email address that I think is publicly known.
Yeah, I think so. It's on the website.
Somewhere.
It is on the website? Okay.
I think so. If you go to the website here... Oh, it's not. Nope, just kidding. No. That's a lie.
The thing, we have the contact form on the website, but I don't think we have an actual email written on the website.
Fill out the contact form.
Perfect.
I don't know. But you can also email me. My email is my email is my name. Nathaniel.w.moore@gmail.com.
I love that. I love my email address is my email address. You'll figure it out.
It's a puzzle. It's like an info skill. If you can figure it out, then you get your answer.
Oh, great.
So it's Nathaniel, EL, not AL. Period W period MOORE @gmail.
It has also just been put into the chat in case anybody is looking.
Oh.
By who?
You'd have to be in the chat to know. So we're going to be back next week to do another one of these, and for several weeks afterward. Alex, who are we chatting with next week?
Our next staff member that we're going to be chatting with is our lovely Caitlin.
Oh, that'll be fun. And that's next Tuesday at 8, right?
Correct.
Perfect. So we hope that all of you will come back and join us here then.
I am sorry, there is an addendum to that. It is 7 p.m. next week, not 8.
Okay. We'll talk about that. Sounds good. So we'll see you guys all here next week at 7.
Now we're having a...
No,
okay, I'm sorry. You were correct. It was 7. It was 8 o'clock. I thought so.
Me too.
Sorry about the confusion there.
This is Mickey's fault. Blame Mickey. But thank you guys all for coming. We know that there's a lot going on, and we appreciate people coming to hang out, and we can't wait to do this again and to see you guys again in the fall. We'll see you all later.
Have a great night.